Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So it's been a while. Apologies, friends. These are not easy to set up, but today I've got for you the Hunter interview. I've got Machi with us here today. They'll be talking about Hunter, every single weapon. So we're talking about sword, partisan, and wired lance. It's gonna be awesome. So this is your first one of these videos. Essentially what we're doing is we're interviewing some of the top end players in their respective classes, people that push their classes to the absolute limit, to understand a little bit more about each class, some of their strengths, some of their weaknesses, and just some things the player wants to see come out of the class itself. It's going to be a pretty long interview, so just grab a bag of popcorn, maybe some chips, maybe, toss it on in the background as you're farming or grinding, maybe deck space or something along those lines, and enjoy the conversation. We will have some gameplay footage on screen. Not sure what it'll be of just yet because we have to grab that B-roll and get that taken care of. But we'll have something on screen for those of you guys who do like to kick back and watch the videos themselves all the way through. But I'd recommend tossing on the background and, hey, maybe this is a good time for you to get that hour of deck space and get that money built up for the next collapse rack that you know you're going to spend a ton of money on. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and pull Machi in and let's get this entire party started. Oh yeah, quick note, all of these are available in a playlist that you will find a link to in the video description. All right, so I have got Machi here with us. Machi, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. Let them know basically why they should be listening to you.
Hi everyone. On ship 1 I go by Astel or Anart or Artemis, but outside of PSO I go by Machi. I've main Hunter since the end of episode 5 on Global to the start to around there, and I've main Hunter since then till now.
Okay.
In base I didn't do as much as I've done in NGS. I tapped into speedrunning, but I never got to to posting really good times because catching up with gear in Global and like at episode 5, at episode 6, it was such a pain in the ass.
Oh, it was brutal. I remember one of the actual bonuses I had of playing for so long was just knowing where everything was going. So I was able to stay ahead of the curve the entire time. But like playing the catch up game, man, I remember helping some friends out, and that was quite a struggle.
Yeah, it was really bad. So my goal back then was just to do as well as I can to make up for my lack of gear. And by doing that, I at the very least got to do every hard content in base. So stuff like HTPD and the one mission that had you go back to PSO1 or something. I don't remember, but it was like a short time attack quest. I don't have that much memories about base since it's been a while, but I've done everything in base.
Gotcha. So yeah, with all the interviews we've had, everyone's kind of had different times they started playing the game overall. My tenure was from back in JP I really say I started playing in episode 4. Technically I started at the end of episode 3 in JP, but like episode 4 is where I really actually kind of sat down and really put time into the game. You're one of the people that jumped in with Global, so definitely pretty cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention as far as that process goes, or was that mostly it?
There's a bit more, but
go for it.
Well, for base, that's it. For NGS, I started since the beta. Like when I heard of NGS, like I knew that I wanted to main Hunter and like push it to the limit. Since I'm not being stuck with gear that's just bad compared to everyone else, I can finally like play on a close playing field and just not be handicapped. So I play. For NGS, I started like really pushing myself to play better at like since L20 when there was nothing to even push. But what I really got into speedrunning was when I first cleared level 45 with 10 purple triggers. I didn't got the Alio one done because back then the gear requirement was so high, and like Retem was on the verge and I didn't want to bother with gearing up. For Retem, I geared up with like the bare minimum. I didn't have this was by the time when Mastery 4 came out, and it was the most expensive thing ever.
Oh god, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and Addy just came out. I didn't have any of those, so my clear was one patch behind. I think it's been a while, but it was like such a tight clear because the gear was so bad, and I only just really started pushing Hunter, NGS Hunter. That's also when the class finally like started shaping into its form today with the introduction of Avenge Arts Parry, where it actually gives you iframes for countering instead of just making you tank.
Gotcha. So basically, you were your kind of beginning process of that was getting into the whole speed running scene, at least when you had enough gear to be able to do so.
Yeah.
So things like time attacks and the purples and things like, yeah, back when the only thing for us to do back at the very beginning of Alea was to, I remember running Bujin actually, time attack runs, and how funny those were with some classes.
Yeah, Bujin solo gigantics in the field, praying that people don't join up and fight with you. So yeah, it was a bad time to speedrun, but it was a good starting point for me. And since then, so when I started speedrunning, that's when I also started using multi-weapon, and that's when the multi-weapon meta started like appearing. So I started with Sword Partisan multi-weapon, just that single multi-weapon up until Stia, when Stia first released. Once Stia released, some of the skill for Wild Lance that remove critical distance when you counter, it made me really value Wild Lance as a multi-weapon, as like a really good sidearm for both my sword and partisan. So from then on, I just took the hit to my gear and always have a multi-weapon sword wire and multi-weapon partisan wire with me. So my gear usually takes a hit. Like usually it's either like when Gland Gigas Mask came out, it took me until like this anniversary that's happening right now as of the recording to be able to move on to it when that augment went down, like the price went down drastically. Like stuff like so my augment is always like one patch behind, or like my fixes like at like 1 or 2. So that's the hit that I take. Usually with free weapons, I can make the difference if I really push all free weapons. Like if I make sure to use each weapon at their best scenario. And if a fight has a scenario where phase 1 I use sword and wire, and then phase 2 I use partisan and wire, then like that's when I make up the time loss for having such horrendous gear comparatively.
Gotcha.
When you speedrun, each like the minute difference in gear, 1 or 2 augment or like 1 or 2 level fixa, it's so drastic because every percent matters when you're speedrunning. For challenge clearing, it's a bit less lenient. Like if you're just trying to get the clear done, it's a bit less lenient. But when you're like pushing for the top of the times, when you're competing with like on Arc's record, the gear requirement is like if you're even 1 augment behind, your time like plummets.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you don't have the gear possible to do a lot of these setups, like I know for a fact, I am pretty much on point gear wise with a good friend, my good friend Kai, who we did the bouncer interview, the Stormblade bouncer interview with. However, he has 2 or 3 off weapons for specific circumstances, and that flat out just like cut his time down by a solid 45 seconds compared to mine. Just because of what he was doing. And it was even like a situation where I was under geared. I'm geared to the teeth. It's just I didn't have the actual weapons that to be able to compare in that situation itself. So seems like we kind of got a little into like the first question. So not too bad. We can kind of start pushing into it because from what I understand, there's quite a bit to talk about. And I'm actually kind of curious since we talked about before the interview even started. One of my best friends in PSO2 who I actually went to play the game with a whole lot was a Hunter main back in the day. So it's something that I've always kind of looked at from afar and kind of kept an eye on, and kind of have like I wouldn't say a difference in opinion about, but like kind of a different perspective on when it comes to hunters. So I'm actually curious to see what you're gonna have to say, but we kind of structure this out, and this is more for like, for you and the audience. We're going to talk about some strengths. We're going to talk about some weaknesses overall in the class itself. And then we're going to have a really fun segment where we talk about things that you specifically, Machi, want to see for the class itself. We can go as crazy as we want. We can go as like specific as we want. Things we think that might be better for like the overall player base. Things that we don't just want for ourselves overall. I know not everyone's super happy with what I want for Bouncer, but also I want it for Bouncer, and I don't care if you're happy with it. But that is what it is. No big deal there. But let's go ahead and jump in. Like I said, we kind of started already a little bit into it. what are some of Hunter's strengths? It doesn't have to be something that only Hunter does, but something that, like, when you think about, oh, hey, this is the situation I'm in, uh, I'm glad I'm a hunter, basically. So what would you say that has to do? It can be all weapons. It can be weapons together, wherever it happens to be.
So the 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 easiest strength for Hunter is that, well, the most noticeable one is that it's just tanky. Like you're
Hmm.
tankier than every other class in the game, no matter what you do. So for when you're like starting out as a hunter, that really helps you just like be able to do damage without being on the
Hmm.
floor. And for the higher end of the hunters, they can use HP as a resource to do more damage.
Oh,
And
I
I'll
love
get
that you
into
said
that.
that.
Yeah.
Love that you said that, because that's something I used to talk about all the time back with Ats back in the day, was leveraging your defenses for offense.
Yep.
So yeah,
And that is a very important thing for sword and wildlands, which I'll get into after I mention the other stuff.
go for it.
Um, the class itself is extremely flexible, even if you're just using one multi-weapon and not going crazy with all three weapon. If you're just using sword wildlands, you can do anything. You have a tap counter, like an instant counter for any attack that you don't expect. You have a pre-fire, a charge counter that does a massive amount of damage. And when the situation allows for that charge counter, when other classes can't do anything, like for example, DFS in phase 2, even now, like there's still dead times where you're just waiting for the boss to come back in situations like that, you can use your HP as a resource to tank certain attacks, to hold the charge up until overcharge and get the counter off on the boss. So in fights that does a lot, like in bosses that does a lot of damage, like Gigantics when they were like one-shotting, and
Hmm.
even now they're still doing a good chunk of damage, and DFS right now,
Hmm.
like it's very risky to play Hunter. If you can't estimate how much HP an attack is gonna take off, you might proc Iron Will and you might die. Die to like an unblockable attack, because Iron Will iframes does not save you from unblockables.
Huh. I actually didn't know
So
that. I didn't know if you had any sort of grace period. That was something I thought about a while back, but never got around to asking.
yeah, the
But yeah,
Iron
that's.
Will iframes is both a
Hmm.
boon and a negative, because it saves you from subsequent attacks, except for unblockables,
Hmm.
but it basically nerfs your damage because you can't parry. And Hunter's main counter is parries. Parries are attacks that get hit stopped. I don't know how to really describe it, but knowing the difference between an iframe and a guard frame is really important on Hunter, because your main counter is a guard frame. So when Iron Will procs, you lose the damage for a good amount of time. So you really don't want to proc Iron Will
Yeah, that's
unless
some.
you're doing a specific strat, which that's I think I'm gonna talk about later.
Yeah, that was actually something we talked about during the Braver interview, that iframes are not always looked at as a boon. Sometimes they can also be a detriment when you're not able to capitalize on something the class does very well, which something the entire game does very well for most classes, which are counters. So yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see or to hear that there are other classes that suffer from that same sort of situation. Maybe being safe all the time is not always a boon or a benefit. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually pretty cool. So, I mean, other than leveraging your HP and things of that sort, what else does Hunter do like really well?
Uh, ad clear. Like compared to base Hunter had terrible ad clear, but in
Yeah,
NGS
it was
Hunter
pretty
has,
bad.
yeah, base was, oh man, Hunter ad clear and base was terrible. But now, like with crafting, Hunter is one of the best ad clearing class in the game. For low
Hmm.
level for like low HP enemy ad clear, like stuff like PSE, LTQ, you just
Hmm.
slap on caliber streak type free, you hold one button and you win. You just like, and you manually aim it if you really want to make sure that you get a lot of kills with one streak. And for higher HP enemies like in Ark's Record, where they're juiced up with the modifiers, like
Hmm.
Geo Labs, if you know, if you path out your counters, if you, how to, the sword and wildlands multi weapon is really good at that. Partisan still struggles with ad clearing a decent amount without
Mm-hmm.
sword and without wired lance. But sword and wired lance, one of the coolest interaction on sword and wired lance is that the weapon action for wired lance also inherit an Avenger bonus if you Avenger with a sword attack.
Okay.
So and because of that, in Geo Labs rank 2, when you set up for like really for high damage ad clearing, you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
go for a sword Avenger, either overcharge or not, doesn't matter. And then after that, you follow up with lasso, and you just move around to be evasive and not get hit. Lasso is like a spinning attack on Wildlands when you use the side when you use a weapon action and a left or right movement input, and
Right.
it just spins and does a good chunk of damage. It's like jet intensity but more powerful because it's buffed by the Avenger bonus.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah, so it
you
sounds
just
like
keep you
I'm sorry,
just
go ahead.
keep that loop going, and you take out all the high enemy HP. It's really good.
It's interesting to hear that Hunter actually is so different when it comes to ad clear. Yeah, because I did do a small stint as Hunter. There's a running joke on my channel of that I'm a Hunter main. This is never true. I may have a shirt that says Hunter main. I have friends that are a part of the joke. They think they're funny. I've given that shirt to my wife because she actually played more Hunter in NGS than I did. But besides the point, yeah, I remember ad clear on Hunter coming down to I can't remember. I gotta remember the name of the ability on global. I remember its JP name, but translated it was overend.
Oh, oh yeah, over, and I know the one. It's like Excalibur.
Yeah, it's a huge Excalibur looking sword attack. I remember
Yeah,
a lot of times just using like uh, a few different attacks and then just into overend because it was just so massive that it would actually hit a bunch of things. But yeah, its AoE
yeah,
ad clear was pretty terrible. It's good to hear that it's actually
yeah.
working really well in NGS because those who follow the channel know that recently I sold my soul to deck space to afford
Wow.
millions upon millions of cosmetic items that recently were spent. We're down about 150 million cosmetics right now. It's a pretty rough time, but that is
Yeah,
besides the point itself. But yeah, it's good to hear Hunter does those things really really well.
yeah.
Was there anything else we wanted to mention specifically as far as like Hunter does things super well? Anything individual like weapon wise, anything like that?
And besides just the class being good at those things, I do want to go a bit into what each weapon is really good at.
Go for it.
So, yeah, starting with sword, it's really easy to perform well. Like you can pick sword is one of those. It is really the beginner weapon that Sega wants it to be. It has
Gotcha.
Auto Avenger, which counters for you as long as you get to that timer, and
Hmm.
Overcharge, which does more damage for going past Auto Avenger. So if you don't know the pattern at all, you just hold a single PA that you know will hit, and you're gonna get away with it, and it's gonna do comparatively better damage than most classes when you are playing at the basic level. And
Okay.
uh, and the thing with sword is that it also has room for optimization, but it that's a boon, and that's a good thing and a bad thing that overcharge is that good and that easy.
I
It
see. I
it kind of
see.
hinders optimization, but I'll go into that later. For
Yeah, we'll
wired
get to it.
lance, yeah, wired lance, what it's good at is that it's really close to a traditional melee weapon. If you use like Slayer, Braver, any other melee class, and you know how to counter those weapons, wired lance is gonna work pretty similarly, and you can pick it up and figure it out quickly. Because for wired lance, if you're just gonna use the wired lance, you're just gonna do fillers into an Avenger with any PA. So instead of countering with your weapon action or a step, you just use your PA instead. So it's a easy transition.
Okay.
And Wildlands has one of the best downs in the game if you set it up correctly. So, come, it is competing with jet intensity still. I think it is better if you
Hmm.
lasso, but it still loses to other options that requires active skill. Uh, like if Wildlands, since you can stock an Avenger on
Hmm.
Wildlands by using the weapon action, and you go into a down with it, you will have
Hmm.
the best down. But without it,
Hmm.
Wildlands down is kind of mediocre because it costs a decent amount of PP
Hmm.
and it's not great damage. Partisan,
Gotcha.
the kit itself, just the partisan weapon on its own, it feels really well to play. like really good to play. It has a lot of options. It has like it's technically only has 4 PAs, but you
Hmm.
have like 5 because the weapon action. You have like 6 because the weapon action does 2 things, which is both a good and a bad thing. But Partisan just feels really good to play. When you play it well, it feels really good. It's just it's not rewarding for how hard it is to play compared to Sword, no.
Gotcha. I'm actually curious. So, it's possible this might still be a thing. I haven't looked into it, and unfortunately, my friends who played Hunter at the time aren't playing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Back in base, there was a PA. I'm sure you're aware of Volgraptor, which was really big for
Mm-hmm.
Partisan, and I believe
Yep.
Partisan's like weapon action or something does something similar to that now. Um,
So yeah, I'll explain it quickly. So
go
one
for
of
it.
the weapon action effect is if you hold it without doing anything, you hold the weapon action, you will shoot out a mini Volgraptor. It is nothing like base Volgraptor. The
Okay.
damage is capped. The cap is calculated by your attack power only. It doesn't factor in your augments. It doesn't fact. The TLDR is that it doesn't factor in a lot of stuff on you. So the cap is like one normal attack worth of damage when you're not fighting something that has high defense like a Gigantics.
I see. I see. So the reason I asked was
And
it was really funny. There was a bug that exists with Volgraptor before where it would just
uh
go off into the distance or go right through the enemy for some reason. And I heard that that happened in NGS at least at the very beginning. Is that still a problem?
I don't. The thing is, Volgraptor, you don't focus on it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times nowadays, with how much Volgraptor we get, because there's a new skill that lowers the cooldown each time you counter on Partisan.
Mm-hmm.
So and because it does like it doesn't do enough damage for you to go out of your way to put it on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't notice that it misses, but it can still detonate. It can still miss if the part breaks. As in, if you stick it on
Mm.
a part that's about to break, it breaks. It's gonna stay in the air, and it might or might not hit the boss that's near the Volgraptor. Like the AOE is pretty small, so it's a
I see. I
gamble.
see. I had to
Either
ask those.
way,
It was a funny
yeah,
meme that we used to laugh about, and I was curious if it because I know mentioned people talked about that still being a problem, and I know some of my viewers even remember laughing about that back in the day. So we just had to know if that was the case itself. But yeah, you can go ahead and continue
yeah,
on Partisan itself and the strengths that it had there. Sorry about that.
yeah. And outside of just playing well, it has the best down, but it's even more niche than the Wildlands one. The Wildlands one requires you to know your down timing and to not use the Wildlands if you already stock it. For the Partisan one, you need to know that timing, you can't stock it, and you need to know if the boss is gonna like move away from you or not before the down so that you can javelin, which is one of the PA, and it's similar to Fear Eraser on launcher, but you can counter with it. So you counter with it before he goes down, like right before the boss goes down, and once it's down, you just hold it until the end, where you release it to get one big hit.
I
It is
see. I see.
it is extremely strong, and because it is extremely strong in in certain situations, it is better for you to just hold to counter it once and just tank everything and let it rip until the
I
boss
see.
dies. Because the situation that allows it is it's only in Arcs record where in shorter Arcs record like what we have nowadays, and in
Mm-hmm.
bosses that doesn't attack a lot and
Mm.
it's on the arena. So it is a bit niche, but it is annoying that is really optimal because uh, its power for what it is higher than what I think it should be. Because Ark's record for Hana right now, until they buff the HP, it's just gonna be that. If the boss like Engoku, the recent Ark's record, it was just that. It was faster than like going crazy in Sword and Wildlands. So I
Gotcha.
stopped competing.
Gotcha. So
And
it's
for Lemnis, yeah, for Lemnis it was the same because like for Lemnis you couldn't get a lot of counters because Lemnis was such a slow boss to attack, so you can
yeah.
tank it even better there. But yeah, for Angoku, since it's so short, it reaches a threshold where you're not optimizing anymore. You're just praying that the crit hits, and since the attack does so many hits at the same time, it's easy and it hits a lot, so it's a really good PA to crit gamble with.
I
and
see. I see.
that became the meta for Hunter and Arc's record until they buffed the HP because the enemies just can't kill you in time, and with EX skill, that is optimal.
Mm-hmm.
What
Gotcha.
one?
Gotcha. So it's a good and
Yeah,
a bad thing. It sounds like bad from a level of optimization because basically it's boring at this point. Good, it does
yeah,
damage, but but one of those situations where you have a little bit of crossover between the two. Um,
yeah.
so were there any strengths that you wanted to mention specifically with combination? I know we kind of touched on them briefly earlier a little bit, but we kind of gone to each weapon individually.
Yeah, I'll touch on combinations too. So sword wildlands, best option on Honor, does everything. That great downs, great pre-fire. It is a complete kit. You have basically 6 PAs to use, 6 or more PAs to use. That's you have a lot of options, and it plays pretty well when you get to use both weapons. But there are situations that you're just gonna be using sword. That also applies to sword partisan. Sword partisan, you're more like compared to sword wildlands where you're using a main weapon and a sidearm. Sword partisan, you're using 2 main weapons, so you're deciding which one works best. And there might be a few situations where one element of one weapon works well as a sidearm option. Like those situations do come up that overpower sword wildlands, but it's more you're using 2 separate main weapons. For
Mm,
partisan wildlands, it's kind of the same to sword wildlands, except that partisan consumes a lot of PP,
mhm.
and wildlands doesn't really help recover it, and it takes even more PP. So
I
as
see.
partisan wildlands, it requires a really good situation that fits really well with it to shine. Is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha, gotcha. So it's kind of like that level. Basically, the weapons, their combinations allow the flexibility, but
Mm-hmm.
that flexibility can be a gift and a curse. It sounds like.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, exactly.
it
You
seems
might
like we
have too
kind
many
of.
options.
I
Yeah,
see. I see. Seems like we've kind of geared you up for the other side of the coin, and this is usually one where most people have the most to say when it comes to their classes, and I feel that I have a lot to say about mine. A lot less these days, considering I got basically everything I wanted with the renewal.
yeah,
More or less, there's
very.
still some things I would like, but I feel like the kid at Christmas that got everything except that one gift, and like you can't really be mad about the one gift. You got everything else, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's we're gearing up for the issues classes have. So outside of things you do well with Hunter, let's talk about the things Hunter runs into problems with. Now we can split this up however you feel like. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand. We can talk about the weapons individually and then in combination. We can then kind of touch on like maybe the individual pieces of content. And or we can kind of, you can kind of sprinkle in the content depending upon the weapon itself and kind of how it works. So it's up to you how you feel like you want to frame that process itself.
Yeah.
Floor is open to you. I'm mostly going to sit back and just kind of like let you go on because everyone's got a lot to say about their class in these situations. So feel free,
Yeah.
take it away. What does
So
Hunter not do well?
so the biggest thing right now, damage. It is
The name
competing
of the
with
game.
Braver. Yep. It is competing with Braver for the bottom class, but for the third worst class. Besides Force and Tector right now that are struggling, above that is Hunter and Braver. Braver excels when they get to play in their matchup. Hunter excel when they get to the matchup. But like they're struggling. They're both struggling at the same level.
I'm about to
Uh,
like Tector's gonna catch a stray. I'm gonna give you guys a benefit right now. I love Tector mains. You guys give damage to all of us.
yeah,
You're gonna be the bottom. As someone's got to be there. Unfortunately, you're the only one that technically deserves to be there. It's a rude thing to say. But
yeah,
Ranger shouldn't be far behind you, to be perfectly honest. But that's besides the point completely. But yeah, it's crazy to hear like you're as low as dude. Whew,
yeah,
Braver's got it rough, dude. And I've seen Braver numbers, so
yeah. I've seen Braver numbers too, and like Bow is what holds Braver back. Like the Katana is struggling too, but like
hmm
Bow is what really changed it back to that low position. Hunter,
hmm
all 3 weapons plays well. Okay, 2 weapons plays well in my opinion. I don't like how sword plays like
I
in
see.
meta right now, but like they have a pretty good kit. Like they're not being chained by one individual weapon. They're as a whole. struggling.
I see.
And like the reason that they're struggling is because we're relying on our PAs. For our PAs is both our PAs and our counter. So if tech cards are being released at this rate, we're just begging for the tech cards to come out, and each tech cards just changes the class so much. It either makes certain parts stronger and certain parts or certain counters weaker. Tech cards has been in my opinion, like tech cards has been the most influential on Honor. Like maybe Force is a bit more, but like if we're ignoring Force, like I think Hunter's the most influenced by tech cards because all three weapons relies on PAs for counters, and each change changes the class gameplay so much.
Mitch heard if we're ignoring Force, and he cried a little bit on the inside because I know he's watching this.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and let you just run it down. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and continuing on that, in a group setting, like Tector, they struggle in damage, but they provide utility. Shifted E-band, overemphasis, elemental downs. Force does the same thing. Hunter, the only thing that Hunter can provide in a group content right now is War Cry. But that only comes up when anyone that uses LRA isn't on Ranger sub, which is usually a Force. But if a Force is out damaging another non-LRA reliant melee class, that situation rarely happens if everyone's on the same skill level. So even in that situation, like you don't really absolutely need a hunter to take aggro to make sure that everyone has LRA. Ironically, hunter works both works the best with Braver and the worst with Braver because of Warcry and aggro holding. Hunter moves around like crazy when they have aggro because PAs are counters, so you gotta move around to make sure that you have time to charge your PAs, or your PAs is gonna move you no matter what you do. Situations like that, you can't sit still on Hunter. And when you have aggro, the Braver gets LRA, but they also struggle to get counters. So it's a catch-22 for Bravers, and they get like almost the most benefits since every other class is not gonna have aggro unless the Hunter player unless the melee player is really struggling one way or another. Another con is that you have free weapons, but you don't have access to all three of them if you don't like just pay for two separate weapons, which is a lot to ask for in our current gearing situation. It sucks that it's like that. Like I wanna play triple multi weapon hunter at the highest level, but I just can't. I just don't have the money because it costs so much to make two separate weapons.
Yeah, that's got to be really rough. To be perfectly honest, part of what I've even like mentioned is things I've wanted. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see that video, but we made a video talking about everything I'd like to see change or what PSO2 really needs. And one thing was specifically that the multi-weapon system, the cost for multi-weaponing when there's so many classes that utilize multi-weapons so well and need them, I would argue basically need the multi-weapons, is just too high. Not that it's like it's overly expensive, but it doesn't make sense to have that price tag attached to it. And I would argue that if we have the multi-weapon system set up the way that it is, we need to move to 3 multi-weapons. Like there's no reason why we have classes that use 3 weapons that don't have an ability to put all 3 weapons together. It seems a little silly to me.
Yeah, at the very least, like Hunter and Fighter, the 2 free weapons class should have a 0 skill point, triple multi-weapon option. Like I understand, like it might be a balancing thing. From one of the friends I usually talk to brought up the point that it might be a balancing thing that they don't want you to have access to all 3 weapons at the same time, which I can kind of see that, but I can brute force that already. So
yeah, I was like, I mean, I could hear someone saying that, but I don't really agree with that anyway, because you can literally use hotkeys to swap weapons anyway. This is just like, it's something that would allow the player to have agency over like their gearing process, because asking someone to best in slot 2 weapons that's a wild thing for someone to have to do. It's already expensive enough that we have to go through this process as it is. I'm not going to tell you to do it twice. Like that's crazy. So
EX Gears really helps with that because that's 3 less augments to stress out about when you're trying to use free weapons, but like even then the cost is still extremely high. And for EX kills, you can have two different, either get lucky, get extremely lucky and get two of the same set, or you just don't.
Gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
yeah.
All right, sorry about that, guys. A little bit of technical difficulty, but we got it taken care of. So we were talking about the triple multi weapons. I think last we left off. So feel free to go ahead and continue from that point.
Yeah. So the cost is extremely high if you want to use every weapon. So you're relegated to only having one multi weapon option, unless you cough out the money to use all three. So that's the takeaway for that. And now to get into my biggest issue with Hunter, which is the over reliance on sword and how sword plays. Sword right now is you either get a window to overcharge and do nothing, or encore jump spam. Take off. So even though encore jump got nerfed a bit back to have a cooldown, you're still spamming that like crazy if you want to push out all the damage you can get. Because the reason is it's not an issue with encore jump. This is not an issue with encore jump. This is an issue with overcharge. In my from how I do the math and how I see it, overcharge is a 2x multiplier that is higher than the Avenger multiplier. What that translates to in a battle is that when you overcharge, you get two of the same PAs at the same time. So you kind of double. It's almost double the charge time to get to overcharge, but it's not quite there. So you're taking less time to do two PAs effectively. And you can multiply that with the Avenger bonus, which is a 1.5x. So the hunter meta is just looking for windows where you can just overcharge. Like we're not at the point that we were at a few months ago with Type 2 Spiral Edge that broke everything. God help me. I don't want to go back to that.
That was quite a time to be alive where I'm sure you're aware of Helvian. When people talk about Gunner stuff, and Helvian was just like, yeah, we finally don't have to be Ranger sub anymore because we have to be Hunter sub because of Spiral Edge.
So it's beyond. Yeah, the thing that people don't, the thing that people overlooked with that is that the Hunter gameplay during that was not that different from the meta Hunter gameplay now.
I see.
Because the difference is that back then it was so powerful that literally nothing is better besides for downs where you can't continuously counter. So it was so much better than everything you have besides like one option, and it was a Hellish Fall. So Hellish Fall is a PN Wild Dance that if you take damage twice, you unleash a counter that's like worth one overcharge in a shorter amount of time, depending on the attack interval. So that is the only option that was better if you hit the attack interval that made it better. And I'll get into that when I talk about Wild Dance and Hellish Fall and HP stuff. But yeah, so outside of that, it was just you tank, you intentionally avoid attacks to get the overcharged Spiral Edge. So you're getting away from danger to overcharge. Completely opposite from what Hunter's supposed to be in my mind and how the kit is designed to be in my eyes. And like the way that sword played then is completely opposite from how Partisan Wildlands plays. Because Partisan Wildlands, you're going for as much counter as you can and like getting the strongest counter as you can at the same time. It's a balancing act. For sword then, it was just no balance. No balancing. You just whatever you can Spiral Edge overcharge, that's when you're like gaming. That's what you're going for. That's the only thing you're going for.
Yeah. And
now,
I was like, so for those who didn't get a chance to experience that when it was a thing, I imagine it was crazy powerful for Hunter, of course, but the tech that Machi was referring to was so powerful that it was actually used as a subclass for a lot of classes in the game. Even classes that had very powerful options, this was still stronger because it was usable as subclass, and it even still did more damage than main class weapons. I'm talking about gunners were using this, slayers were using this. It was insane how useful it actually was. So
it was PB level damage. So
Yeah, it was crazy high.
it was, I don't know why it got released in that state at all. The current state is like exactly where I should have released that, but that's besides the point.
I'm sure someone missed a zero somewhere, or it, like my usual tinfoil hat theory, they did it on purpose just so it would break the game for a little while and have
I
some
hope
fun.
they did, because no way they missed no way they messed up the map that badly.
I have like a huge tinfoil hat theory with all these things that imbalance is the spice of online gaming, and sometimes devs do things on purpose and say, "Oops, sorry, we messed that up. We got to rebalance it." Either that, or there's a possibility, because who was it? Uber mentioned this to me. What we thought there might be a possibility that they thought about it in the vacuum of just the weapon itself, and not in the context of overcharges damage multiplier. And I could foresee that being part of it, but I also like to think they just wanted it to be overpowered to break the game for a while. I think that's a much more of a fun headcanon.
Even like, I think the only case that this would make sense is that if Hunter is a sword only weapon, and that future tech arts are gonna come out immediately right after, which doesn't happen, and like Hunter is more than just sword only. So
that's exactly why I had the thought process I did.
Yeah, it deleted, like, that PA basically deleted partisan out of your option. If you're using partisan, you should be overcharging. Like if you're playing partisan, it's like the meme where you're like try harding, sweating like crazy, pushing partisan, and then sword just one button. It was so frustrating for me, because like I know it was even more frustrating for people who use partisan only, but like for me, it was extremely frustrating, because like, why am I making this weapon? What's the point if I'm just like, if I can just hold one button and get away with the best damage in the game?
Exactly.
Like, it was so unfun for me that I didn't play that much. I cleared MDFA using it on Vishmouse when it was like that time point. Like everyone was on Flugo and I was on Vishmouse. I knew the power of the PA, so I abused it for Vishmouse clear, and I basically left the game for that entire season.
Yeah, I mean that does happen. I know. Who was it? Nep Cool is just straight up not playing bouncer right now because of the bouncer changes. He basically has become a Waker main essentially, but for a while he just wasn't playing the game, which does happen. I know some people. By the way, contrary to popular belief, for those of you guys who don't go into speedrunning, occasionally there are class balance changes that you just don't agree with. You just don't like, and you may not like what happens for the weapon. It is very sad for people who really like their classes, and I mean, some people stick with it, but sometimes you just stop playing the game for a while. That's okay. That is a completely reasonable thing for it to happen. It's very sad. It sucks. Bouncer was kind of like, I'm not going to say it was dog shit, but I just didn't like how it played. To me, what I explained to people was like, it handled like a Mack truck. It hit hard as hell, but you couldn't turn.
Yeah, exactly. I remember
awful.
Bouncer before renewal. Yeah, that's a really good analogy for Bouncer. I played it a bit to compare, and like, oh my god,
it was like
I was glad I was a Hunter then. Now
it was so bad. Like there were just skills didn't make sense. Like you could hit hard, but like time and time again, I was like, guys, I will give you the damage if you please just give me a counter that works. Give me a block that makes sense. Let me block more than once in a PA. It's never going to be the case. But so
sword is kind of like in that analogy right now. It does okay damage when it gets a perfect matchup, but it's so boring and handles like a truck. It's like driving a truck on a freeway. Like nothing's happening. You're just doing one thing over and over again. Like
that's awful.
Like even after, like I know that there are people that likes how slow Hunter plays. Like now I'm talking in the perspective of like already nerfed the Spiral Edge, and we're just like Hunter right now.
Right.
Like, I understand that there are people who likes a slower sword that's closer to like other games where two-handed sword are extremely slow, but I just want options, man. Like I don't want to be stuck to just overcharging. I don't want lower risk to be rewarded more on sword. This is only sword too. Sword has two options that incentivize high risk, high reward, but the reward is still lower than just ignoring those options and just overcharging.
I see. To be fair, for the record, I'm on your side of that situation. I feel like it should always be a reward situation. It should always be higher if there's more risk involved. So for sure.
Yeah, so sword right now, the most optimal way to play sword wild dance is you take off slow fall, you anchor spam, unless you anchor spam and overcharge. You don't tank and avoid other counters to go
Mm-hmm.
for overcharge, but you tunnel vision on overcharge a lot. And the
Mm.
optimization beyond that is in wild dance optimization. And wild dance right now compared to sword is like compared to sword overcharging. When sword is not overcharging, wild dance is doing a bit better. But
Mm-hmm.
that is a very like if you're not forcing yourself, if you're not finding every situation that you can overcharge, you're not playing meta for Hunter, unfortunately. And I really don't like that. I really dislike that it's just overcharge, like focusing. And
Mm-hmm.
again, overcharge is an automatic counter. You just charge that point, and as an attack the attack comes to you, and it automatically releases for you. You're not
Mm-hmm.
doing the counter itself. It is a very easy thing to pull off. There are like certain PAs on Hunter that is hard to like hit the boss because the hitbox is bad, like Spiral Edge.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best overcharge option, but like the hitbox is kind of bad. But if you ignore Spiral Edge and just overcharge with Relentless Cleave, which has the best hitbox for overcharging and just a charge PA in general, you're still like getting 80% of that effectiveness already. That 20% is what separates like clearing, just barely clearing a hard quest and like speed running. So there's still like risk reward there, but like you're just so tunnel vision and overcharge that it's just boring. And wired lands, if the more you use wired lands, the worse you're gonna perform compared to just staying back and overcharging. On wired lands, you have to go for every counter opportunity possible so that you're not just you you cannot spend any time doing fillers if you're playing optimal wildlands. You should be in the Avenger bonus constantly whenever you're doing a PA. So when wildlands is doing that and not doing Hellish Fall, because Hellish Fall it is really good, but it requires at least it's not niche to the point where there's only like one or two fights that can use it, but
Mm-hmm.
it is nicher than using overcharge, which is guaranteed damage. Because Wildlands, Hellish Fall. So like I said, you have to take 2 hits to activate the counter. The first hit gets 50% DR from the PA, but you take damage.
Mm-hmm.
That 50% DR doesn't do much in bosses like Dark Force Solus right now. That boss will do half the HP bar if you don't have Hunter Physique up still.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with 50% DR. The second hit that you have to take is iframe. So you get that, but it doesn't iframe through unblockables because it is just an Avenger iframe. So there are situations like Solus Wall, like the current Solus, the third phase where you have walls doing pods.
Oh yes, the
You
wipeout
have
wall.
to, yeah, that doing that wall, you have to
Mm-hmm.
know for sure that you're not gonna Iron Will or you're gonna die because Iron Will won't save you. Iron Will, you're gonna die before Iron Will procs because it's an unblockable. It's an unblockable. So the Iron Will iframe does nothing. So
And
in that situation, it takes like 2 resters to deal with.
and for our friends out there who don't play Hunter specifically and aren't aware of what Iron Will is, I mean, I have a very rudimentary understanding. It's just it's one shot protection. But if you want to give a bit more context, exactly what Iron Will does for us here.
So Iron Will, when an attack drops your HP to 0, it will keep your HP at 1. And it will give you iframes for a short duration. I don't remember the exact duration because you don't want to get to that point to play. When you're playing optimally, you don't want to get to that point.
Right.
So Iron Will, it is a for 90% of situations where you're not pushing yourself to pushing the class to the limit. Like Iron Will is a lifesaver. It is the best thing ever. But in situations where you're pushing to the limit, Iron Will might as well not exist. Like there's like sometimes if you're in a group, dying might be better than Iron Willing because you don't want that iframe where you can't counter. But that situation rarely comes up, and that's like a really niche speedrun situation. Like this has to be a situation where you're like pushing your entire group is pushing to the limit to get the fastest time on this class. in a group. So
I
that
see.
situation really comes up. But yeah, the iframe from Iron Will, it doesn't save you from stuff that's unblockable. So it basically doesn't exist.
I see. And correct me if I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember. Was Iron Will a guarantee proc with a cooldown, or was it like a percentage chance proc?
In base, it was 75% chance. In
That's what I'm
NGS, it's
remembering.
guaranteed. Thankfully,
That's
thankfully.
that's what I'm remembering. Good old Iron Skill, man. I love when Iron Skill would proc. So, that's right, because it would proc, but it had no cooldown in base, so you could proc
Yeah,
it
no.
multiple times.
Oh yeah, there's a 2 minute cooldown in NGS. Yeah, like you could
Okay.
proc it multiple times in base. Yeah, it's a
Good
gain
old,
and a loss, but
good old Iron Skill.
overall, yeah.
but uh, but yeah, I see. Okay, so sidetracked a little bit there. Apologies. Just wanted to make sure we had that there for frame of reference, because I don't remember everything when it comes to Iron Will. I just
Hmm.
know what people say, but it's always worth getting
Yeah,
that extra bit of context there. So we're
yeah,
talking a little bit
yeah.
about different weapons and their weaknesses at the moment is where we are at the moment. We're talking to some basically the problems with sword, which is hilarious
Yeah,
because sword is my like favorite looking weapon. I think
same.
Wildlands might be like my favorite actual weapon though, like conceptually, because it's I'm not sure if you played what was it PSU back in the day, but
Oh no, I'm not
why
that old.
I see. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm the boomer here, by the way, guys. So yeah,
yeah,
I played PSU back in the day. Wired Lance is just a amalgamation of two weapons from PSU, the claws and
yeah.
the whip, actually. So it's pretty funny to see those weapons because some of those combinations actually show up with some of the PAs that they
Yeah.
use. But yeah, so we're talking about the issues with sword. I'll let you keep going. You mentioned that you rambled, dude. I will sidetrack us all day long. Go for
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna ramble like crazy in this section because like this is what makes me like really demotivated from speedrunning on Hunter because like when you're pushing Hunter to the limit because of like sword being this meta, it's really boring. That's why you don't see a lot of speedrunning Hunter. Like
Mhm.
the remaining speedrunning Hunters, they must like they enjoy the overcharge gameplay, and I get it. Like I'm not so when I'm like basically shitting on overcharge. I'm not saying to remove it. It's a good overcharge is a good thing for Hunter. It
Mhm.
fits the class. It's just right now it is overtaking everything else you can do because of time. A part of the reason that overcharge is this reliant, you're this reliant on overcharge for meta is because
Mhm.
of PA crafting. So PA crafting affects PA, and every PA on Hunter is every PA on Sword is both a counter and an overcharge option. So when that option gets boosted, and other Avenger options on other weapons doesn't or like barely gets boosted comparatively, it's gonna create an imbalance. It's gonna force you to focus more on Sword. So that's why right now, Partisan and Wired Lands, which I think in my opinion takes way more effort to play, just does less. Like even in their, they would have to be in their best situation for them to outdamage Sword. And if they're outdamaging Sword, it's because Sword can't overcharge, and because you can't overcharge, you're not playing meta Hunter.
I
You're not
see. I
at the
see.
peak of Hunter. So yeah,
Gotcha. So
and
yeah, basically, like overcharge is good. It's good that it's there. It's good it's an option,
uh-huh,
but it shouldn't be the only one that's overshadowing everything.
exactly.
Which I can totally understand that perspective. Like that's totally fine because it is a bummer. I know a lot of people that really do like optimizing their classes a whole lot, and when everything is relegated to you do one thing. Yes, don't worry. My JetBlue main's out there. I still remember you. I haven't forgotten you. I know you have a 3-button rotation right now, and you're not a big fan of it. Doesn't matter how much damage it does. But
Yeah,
it's definitely not a positive aspect or positive look for the class. So I can
yeah.
totally agree with that perspective for sure.
And the thing is, when Overcharge first released, it was balanced perfectly. Sword, all of Sword PAs was just a pre-fire. You're not looking for overcharge window. You're looking for Avenger windows, and you just overcharge when you have a pre-fire option.
Hmm.
And if you're just going for overcharge for Avenger windows, Partisan does that way better back then before they buffed Sword to Partisan and Wildlands level without accounting for the fact that Sword has overcharge,
Hmm.
whereas Partisan and Wildlands doesn't have anything like that.
Hmm.
So now it's like just overcharge, and it's just focusing on overcharge. It's not a pre-fire anymore. It's the main gameplay, and that just sucks for min-maxing because you have an enhanced step counter that launches you to the boss that you can barely use.
Oh yeah.
You only use it when it's like a situation where you messed up, like you didn't know, you just messed up the pattern or something. That's when you use it. Same for the guard counter. You're not using it to cancel. Like back then, you use it to cancel a PA early to get an extra counter in, and those extra counters it's gonna go a long way back then. But now those extra counters doesn't matter if you're not getting the overcharge after what you're doing before it, or after what you're doing before it, you lose. You lose in terms of damage.
I see. Yeah, I could hear the frustration of Sword, and I definitely like a lot of what you're mentioning. Yeah, that would probably irritate me as well. So that's totally understandable.
So, and the other issue is the other side of this issue is that Partisan is it doesn't do enough to out damage this. Because Partisan doesn't do enough, Sword is just overcharging. So, Partisan right now, the PP cost is thankfully not as bad anymore with EX skill, with all these PP consumption and PP regeneration EX skill. Partisan PP issue isn't as bad anymore, but the damage is still worse than Sword because the two crafts that they got, one of them is for Javelin, which it's a niche PA already, so you don't use it actively unless you're going for that strat where you're just tanking and holding that one button down. That one got an unconditional upgrade. For the other one, Cleaving Scythe, it is the shorter charge PA. What it does as an option on Partisan is that it's a quicker charge counter option for Partisan. What it got is that it has a craft that made the first hit multiple hits, but it front loads the PA. Somehow. It front loads the PA to be 69.3% of the entire damage, but the entire damage is nerfed. So that created a new created a new gameplay loop, a new gameplay style for Partisan, which is you just half cancel that PA into an assault charge. You go for more assault charge than normal Avengers.
No.
The issue.
I was gonna say, like with the mention that you had there, just as like a question, and I'm sure other listeners will have the same question that I'm thinking of as well. Is you mentioned overcharge kind of being the reason why Sword is so incredibly powerful. And you're welcome to disagree. I'm not sure if this is the case, but do you think by applying that sort of mentality or that overcharge to the other weapons that would then fix that problem, or would it exacerbate the issue?
It wouldn't do anything in my opinion, because overcharge, the reason overcharge is an issue for me is that it's the only option. And like it is not what it was, which is a pre-fire. It is now the only option to play meta. And for Wildlands, it wouldn't do anything because Wildlands doesn't charge. For Partisan,
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, for Partisan, it would go back. It would go kind of backwards to what Partisan is trying to do, which is trying to do back to back doing something continuously, instead extending the Avenger bonus, as I like to put it, instead of like just doing one PA and going back to charging.
So the idea is that it's not just the fact that it's, it makes Sword so strong in the first place. It's also the fact that it's like Sword's only option of what it can do that it does well. So it's because it's so strong. Yes, it makes Sword very strong, but also like you don't do anything else on Sword either. So it's kind of like a twofold situation.
Yeah,
I understand.
It's really hard to understand like this issue if you don't like play Hunter a lot, because when you just look at it from if you just look at it from watching other player play, like it still looks cool. If you don't know much about a class, it still looks kind of cool because like you're moving around to get a big powerful hit off. So I understand the appeal for that. It's just when you play Hunter and like all the other options just pales in comparison, it's just frustrating. You're putting so much effort into Partisan and what even on Sword, if you put effort into manually avenging early, because there are 3 stages of a charge on Sword. The first stage is you just perfect charge, like you just you get to the point where the PA is considered charged, but before the point that Auto Avenger procs. A late charge is how I put proccing Auto Avenger without proccing Overcharge. And Overcharge is the 3rd stage. So even if you're pushing the class, like taking risk by manually charging and like just chaining Avenger on Wild Lands back into to perfect charge counter on Sword, similar to how Partisan plays, it's still worse than getting an overcharge off at any point. Like I struggle to explain this really well, but like
I'll say it tracks. No, it makes sense as far as what you're looking at. One portion of your kit is so strong that even optimally utilizing other portions of your kit, it still doesn't really compare to that portion that you were there. I mean, I've made a lot of comparisons to Etoile, but that is literally what the problem was for Etoile with its 3 different weapons. Is Wand was so incredibly powerful at doing everything that even if you put in the highest amount of effort in something like Double Saber, you just would do less damage, which was extraordinarily frustrating.
At least for a toy, from what I know from a friend that still plays a toy in HTPD, is that yes, that is the case. Like it's not as severe as compared to Sword. Like if you're using the other 2 weapons and they have a perfect matchup, they're still like that is still the meta option. Like using the other option is still the meta option if you're in a perfect situation for it.
Oh no! Unless they've massively changed anything, that is not correct. Wand had a better matchup, even in the best case scenario for Soaring Blade and for Double Saber. Wand did more damage. It was just scaled stupidly. I mean, you could use everything. The only time I think it HTPD specifically is if, like, I know he cycled resistances. So, like, if he would resist a different weapon, then yes, that would be the case. That would be the case. But like in the same matchup, like let's say for example, I think it was if we're considering even without basically if you had like just one weapon the entire time, right? I'm not sure if you remember solo Sodom runs.
Yeah, I remember.
That was basically Soaring Blade's god tier like situation. Like it was set up so it was able to do full connects every 15 to 20 seconds, which is like unheard of, like unheard of basic levels of being able to play the weapon correctly.
Yeah.
And Juan still did more damage than it. It was literally its best case scenario, and it still was slower, and so was Double Saber. So unless they found like some crazy tech that I missed between the ending or anything along those lines, unless it's just like resistance in that situation, because if it was resisted, then you would do more damage to other weapons. But it basically was like Wand was overcharge for Sword. It did everything.
But I think it's even worse than NGS because multi-weapon incentivizes you to basically dual wield 2 weapons at the same time, like chaining them together for their perfect situation. And even in the best multi-weapon combinations, Sword Wild Lance, like if the situation allows it, you're better off just using the Wild Lance just for downs, just stalking it once and ignoring the Wild Lance if you can overcharge. Like overcharge
like braver.
Unless you can delete overcharge, like unless you find a situation that you just cannot overcharge no matter what you do. That is the only situation where overcharge isn't the best option. And that just sucks. Like unless that skill is literally deleted, that it is the only best option that we have. Whereas
I see.
If we look at Partisan in a vacuum, there are 2 distinct gameplay style that you can like decide between. Like, okay, it's not distinct, it's minute. So for Partisan, you can either focus on getting more Avenger counters instead of backloading into an assault charge. So on Partisan, there's a skill that if you parry with a weapon action, the weapon action does so many things on Partisan. And it's a pain to explain.
I heard.
If you just weapon action without doing a PA before, you're gonna like do a swipe. If you hold it, you shoot out a Volraptor. When you swipe, it is a parry. If you parry with that, your next assault charge, which is a weapon action after a PA, will be buffed by 2.3x.
Okay.
That is a higher modifier than overcharge. But the issue is that weapon action damage is not it is minuscule compared to every sword PAs. So that bonus is huge and it stacks with Avenger, but compared to sword, it's still weaker because you need an extra counter and you still need to make sure you perfect charge everything.
I see.
To like get somewhere close to overcharge. Overcharge is just free and it's free damage compared to Partisan. Partisan has to either go for constant perfect charge counters, and when you play Hunter at the top level, when you just push Hunter at all, it is a stamina challenge because the Hunter counter is tighter than most counters in the game. It is not that lenient, and it's a charge counter for 90% of the situations you're in, unless you're Wildlands main. So it's a charge counter that you have to do back to back, and you have to make sure you're not late charging, because the more time that you spend charging, that doesn't get to overcharge, and for Partisan you can't get to overcharge. So the more time you spend charging doing nothing, you're losing damage. So you have to play really tight. Like every situation, you have to have a good answer for it. You have to know the boss exactly on Partisan. You cannot make a mistake or you're gonna lose a lot of damage compared to sword just holding one button effectively. Like it's not as simple as I'm saying it is, but from my perspective, and I've speedrun since AO20, it just feels like I'm just holding one button when I could be doing a lot more.
Yeah, no, I think you've explained a lot of it. It actually does make a lot of sense as far as that process goes. And going into this, you guys have some perspective. I knew nothing, basically. My experience with Hunter was level 20. And I level every class, but I don't level playing the class itself. I play with like as a subclass or as a main class with like my sub being bouncer or something. So I feel like you actually have explained it pretty thoroughly as far as that process goes. And the frustrations make sense. Like they really do. It kind of sucks to hear that's kind of where Hunter's at the moment. So that makes me hopeful for some of the ideas of changes. And I can't lie. There's a couple of things I thought of that I feel like this should be very obvious. Definitely easy thing to change. So I'm looking forward to our section of what things should be changed in Hunter. But to kind of keep things, cruising on along, are there any other kind of major things that you wanted to touch on as far as like issues that you know of that, like when you think to yourself, oh, I know for a fact like Hunter has an issue with that, like what else would you kind of put out there?
Another thing, because of how reliant you are on sword, you're gonna have a PB generation and a down factor generation issue. So what that to put that into perspective, it is a really big issue in Goku. If the fight and Goku before discovering Arcs record, and Goku won Arcs record before when we were level 85 or 80, when the boss still took like 4 minutes. Other classes could get at least one down. Hunter couldn't. And when you cannot get a down on a boss that exposes a weak point, it becomes a huge issue. And I might have been wrong about that one. I think it was Hunter could only get one down, but other classes got two. But the PB generation and the down factor generation, because this stuff go hand in hand. The reason it's an issue is that PB generation and down factor generation is determined by hit count. Each hit is coded a set amount. On Hunter, you're doing little hits on sword and partisan. Wildlands does more hits, but like I don't know why it still struggles with it. So I'm not sure of how. I'm not 100% sure if Wildlands maining, because Hunter has a lot of styles. Like it has a lot of options. It has free weapons, so it has a lot of style. You can either focus on sword as the main weapon and Wildlands as a sidearm, or you can use Wildlands as the main weapon and sword as a sidearm. It just adjusts how you play. So that's both a positive and a negative. It's just some of those styles, one is just better no matter what you do. When we're talking about a multi-weapon combination that has sword, the sword one with overcharge will be better no matter what. Unless you're in a situation where you can't overcharge, that's the only time that the sword option with overcharge is not better. Like even Partisan Wildlands, like sometimes like partisan struggles, so like Wildlands comes out and do more. Like it's a style thing. That's how I like to put it. But yeah, overall, the PB generation, the down factor generation, even though Partisan has the best down attack in the entire game. Volk Raptor, it does minuscule damage, but it generates a lot of down. So if you're using off cooldown, you can kind of make up the down factor generation. But compared to other classes, you're still working a lot more for a decent amount of down factor. Whenever shooting out a Volk Raptor can be a loss too. So like you're not shooting it off cooldown because there are situations where you want to counter with a PA, you don't want to shoot it out. So like the PB, yeah, it's overall like is struggling with that. In group play, that could be detrimental for a speed run. For a clear, it's not that bad. You just get one less PB than everyone, so you just gotta really push to make that up. But it's struggling. The more you use sword, the more you struggle with it.
I see. Yeah, and that's pretty big, especially in Goku, where that weak spot is huge. I on the other side, I feel like it just spoiled. Play bouncer. I just generate down factor because I exist. So yeah, that's gotta really suck, especially for that weak spot, because it is his only weak spot that pops up. But yeah, that's pretty brutal. And that's coming from someone who, like, I mean, it's coming from, we talked about best in slot gearing on the channel recently, and I mentioned about the whole using Orgis situation for that specific reason of how impactful PBs can be, specifically at the right times and getting a hold of them. So that is brutal, to say the least.
Yeah, and it dominoes that lower PB generation. Like in certain situations, you're gonna have one less PB than everything and than everyone else, and your class damage is already pretty weak. So like if you get even one less PB, and that's a part of why Hunter is so low down there. Like Gunner is struggling with PB generation in certain situations, but compared to Sword and like compared to Meta Hunter, Hunter struggles even more. You're gonna lose out on one PB over the course of an entire fight, and it's
pretty huge. Yeah, it's pretty huge for sure. So I think we've got a pretty good determination of a lot of things Hunter really struggles with, and I'm got a very new appreciation for my Hunter brethren out there. That is for certain. I think we're going to get into the fun part of this interview, the part that I like the most, the part that I feel like is the most divisive. And honestly, it's fine. You guys are allowed to disagree with our opinions, but because we're the ones on the screen, we're right and you're wrong. I'm joking. I'm the one who brought this up. Do not come in Machi for this. I'm the one who's hostile. Show up on the stream. We'll fight then. But besides the point, I want to hear from your perspective. I have a couple ideas as well, so I'm going to bounce them off of you, and you let me know if I'm off base, because I've been off base before, and you know, people have helped me out with good ideas here. So if you could have some things that you want to see change for your class, they can be massive, they can be small, they can be specific to you, they can be what you think is good for the overall health of the game. It's just an open floor to say, if you could redesign or change some things around, what would you do? And the order is up to you as well. Just kind of let us know, like, hey, like this is something small I would think would be easy to do, versus like, all right, they gave me the keys to the kingdom. Here's what we should be changing. So go for it.
So I'm gonna separate this into what I want on Hunter, what I want on each weapon too. Because for the class, I just want automate. Automate should come back, because I'm out of palette space. I am completely out of palette space. I don't have space for rezzing people. I'm not gonna have space for Mars, so I'm gonna have to swap to a different sub palette if I wanna.
Oh Jesus! I totally forgot about that. If I want to use Mars. Mars takes us up. Yo, people aren't getting rezzed anymore on my palette. That's all that's gonna happen. Y'all just stay dead. Don't die if you want me to res you.
So like there are situations where like I watch people on the ground and I can't do anything about it unless I like literally back the hell out from the boss and like swap my sub palettes to get to a res.
I see.
The reason is like this isn't an issue if you're just using 2 weapons. Since I'm using 3 weapons, basically my entire Wildlands palette is on my sub palette. Like 90% of it is on there. So I don't have space for a res, and I just want automate. And besides like palette space with helping with palette space, it's also really help with Hunter damage, kinda, because when you're doing something that's not charging or overcharging, you're losing damage because the main source of damage on Hunter is charging or is doing a counter. And when you're doing those counters, that takes a lot of time to finish and you have to chain. If you're healing, you either have to like interrupt an action, for partisan and sword, you have to just normal attack and like spam that healing button and hope it goes off and then goes back and then go back to charging. For Wild Lance, like you just spam that button and hope that there's like a window in the PA in one of the counter PAs that you have that it just allows you to heal because what window allows for healing depends on what window allows for canceling. Healing doesn't cancel an action, but it activates depending on a window that allows you to cancel.
Exactly. And I can hear you guys in the comments already. Well, it's instantaneous. Well, you have an EX skill. Yeah, give it to Hunter by default. If you want to make it at 75% like or 25% HP, whatever it happens to be that needs to happen, just make sure Hunter has it by default. It was their skill to begin with. I know we have it as an EX skill, but like they have to then dedicate the EX skill to it. That's silly.
Really? I'm pretty sure the automate one hasn't come out as an EX skill yet.
Oh, it is. There is one that if you fall below a certain HP pool, it uses a Rest of Sun. I believe it's below 50%.
I saw it and I tried looking for it, but I didn't see a single one in the market. I must be blind.
That's fair. I haven't looked for the skill. I've seen it and I've seen people talk about it, but I have never actually actively looked for the skill. I've only ever talked about the EX skill. So maybe
you've seen it on a Meriden?
Well, I've seen people talk about the skill itself. Like they have basically people data mine the entire list of all EX skills and like had them all listed.
Yeah, I saw it.
And everything else. So I saw like the list of EX skills. They're on all of the wikis. Everything is there. And I haven't heard of anything on that list that wasn't in game. But truth be told, I also haven't looked for that skill. So maybe it's not there.
I'm like 90% sure it's not there because like I was frothing at the mouth for that. I just didn't want to have a healing skill on my palette and like I kept looking for it and I couldn't find it. So
that's possible, but also give it to 100 by default. Make it like 75%. Make 25%.
Like I'd love for it to just be automated 50%. Like, but at this point, I'll take anything just to save the palette space and save time for me to charge if I'm gonna have to charge a PA. Like on Partisan that I enjoy charging on, like I don't want to waste time healing. Like sometimes I just sit on like wet borders level of HP because I just don't want to waste time charging.
I feel you.
And I know I'm not gonna get hit. Yeah, you're gonna in my gameplay that's gonna get uploaded when I hellish fall a lot. You're gonna see me in the red a lot. Anxiety, like crazy anxiety.
I'm sure people are gonna love that one, but they're used to it. I recently got shortage HP. So now I live under 50% HP at all times.
Yeah.
So my chat has seen me hit like single digit numbers of HP because of my burn and freak out. It's pretty funny.
Yep, and another thing with like the lacking damage for Hunter, like the meta EX skill, the EX skill that needs you to burn, if you have a White Lance slotted, if you have a White Lance multi-weapon and you want a Hellish Fall, you cannot use those burn setups because you're wasting Restas. So we're locked. So if you're like speedrunning solos, we're locked out of burn setups completely.
That's a bummer.
So and for Lively, Lively also doesn't work. Lively is the other conditional one that needs you to be at nearly max HP. That one doesn't work either because you're losing HP anyways.
Exactly. I didn't even think about that. Hunter doesn't really have a good EX combination that you can use conditionals for. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, so like you just use whatever saves you. You just use stuff that makes up for your lack of stuff, which is PB consumption, PB generation, and the down factor generation.
Now, I never considered that when I was talking about the EX skills, so I'm sure there are hunters out there that are like, hey, you forgot about us, and that's fair. I did forget about you, and I apologize. Maybe SEGA did too. But hopefully they think about it moving forward, so we'll have to see. So we mentioned give back automate. What else we got?
Sword. I'm gonna trigger so many people, but
do it.
I want Blaze Parry back on Sword. I don't want base hunters. Yeah, that shouldn't be a bad thing, but I've seen a lot of disagreement about it. But I'll explain it to. I think it's a lot of like people just think that I'm asking for base Sword to come back. I am not asking for base Sword to come back. Base Sword was so much worse than NGS Sword. I've been playing base sword. I go back for blaze parry because I love it so much. But like when I'm not blaze parrying on base sword, it is the worst thing ever. It's like driving a truck again.
I'll give devil's advocate here because I know we mentioned a lot of a situation where you use one thing. From what I understand and what I remember, blaze parry was the whole weapon when it was sword.
Yeah. And
so I can understand the concern there. I get where people are coming from there. So maybe balance a bit more where there's other options, but also blaze parry was sick. I've never been a big fan of. Right. I've never been a big fan of like bring back the old PA or add extra PAs in, but like I'm on team bring back blaze parry. I'm sorry. Like, I know you guys are upset, but listen, Machi's won me over. I agree. Bring back blaze parry.
And what I'm not asking, and I already made this as a suggestion on the official Discord. So if you really want to look more into what I exactly mean, you can look up blaze parry in official Discord, and you're gonna see my one post.
I see.
So I want blaze parry back, but like balance so that it's in between other options, not the only option like overcharges right now. Because if we just bring back blaze parry 1-1, that's just bring base sword back, and that's just blaze parry, blaze parry, blaze parry. You don't have any other option, and everything else worse. Even though it's a good, it's a really good feeling option in my opinion. It's like only one option is really bad for any class. If you only have one option for like meta play, and it is the only option available, I think that's a bad balancing, like bad gameplay.
Oh, 100% agree. And I think you guys don't realize if blaze parry came back in its 1-1 form as it was in base game, it would be all Hunter does. It would be broken because we would have Counter Star Online that we have in NGS with blaze parry from base PSO2, which was just the counter king. So it would be ridiculous.
Yeah. So how I want them to balance that new blaze parry is that like everything it does should be like what it does, not the damage, should be the same as base. The damage should have high total damage and high DPS. It should be the best option for when like the boss is actively attacking you and like he's on you, like he is not running away like Dalian or something. When you're in that situation, you're consistently countering. Like if you're not just sitting in iframes and like this would create more. The reason I really want blaze parry is that if you add any other PA or like any other option that can be active, that can be buffed by overcharge, it doesn't solve anything. You're just changing which PA you hold for infinity until the sun blows up. And if blaze parry comes back and it fits in, and if it's not the only option, step counter would like indirectly be more useful because you're step countering to have a front loaded counter that is faster. You're charging to have your like perfect charging to make sure that your PA hits, because blaze parry is multiple hits. Even though it's backloaded as hell, it's still multiple hits. So charging, if you're gonna miss any of those hits, it should be weaker than just charging a PA and make sure that it hits. Overcharging is a free fire again. Like it would complete the Hunter kit. And if you make an instant counter similar to how Wildlands is right now, if you make an instant counter for sword, it would also make skip arts, a completely forgotten skill on Hunter outside of downs, more useful again. Because what skip art does, I think everybody knows this by now, but same art, skip arts, two of the same PA, you skip to the third step. Two of the same two different PA, you skip to the fourth step on Hunter for a sword. For all three weapons actually. But if you right now it doesn't have a use. Like it might as well not exist, because if you're doing normal attacks, even though the fifth normal is like a powerful normal compared to any other normal in the game, it's still you're still not overcharging. You're effectively wasting time.
I see.
There's no point to using that. And the guard counter is the same thing. Guard counter is basically a longer version of the step counter. Like it doesn't have a use, because if you're using it to fit a perfect window, you could have used that time to overcharge instead.
Gotcha.
The more time that you're not overcharging, the more you lose on Hunter overall, and that's why I think Blaze Bear would be a perfect fit if you move the main counter to a unique counter that is still harder to pull off than Avenger, because originally Avenger as a concept on Hunter is just Blaze Parry, but it's not Blaze Parry.
It is. It's basically just Blaze Parry.
Yeah.
The way it works out is you use it very similarly with Blaze
you
Parry.
use
And for
it-
those who aren't aware how Blaze Parry worked back in base game, essentially you'd start up a PA where you do a bunch of slashes, very similar to what Caliber Streak looks like. But imagine if Caliber Streak just went off on its own. And as a target hits your Blaze Parry, if you were to press your, at the time was your weapon action button, you would your entire Blaze Parry animation would speed up. You would essentially counter the ability, and your Blaze Parry would increase in damage. So you weren't able to just like, press Blaze Parry and do nothing. But if you pressed it, it would speed up, do more damage, counter the ability, and also would give you iframes for the remainder of the Blaze Parry. So it was very common for Sword Hunter that you would want to essentially press a PA to combo it into your Blaze Parry. I think it was like Stun Concerto, I think is what you used very often to boost the damage of your Blaze Parry, and then just Blaze Parry to home for tons of damage.
Yeah,
so
it was the only option. Like, even if you have a lot of downtime to set up something, there was an overcharge back then. So, like, the only counter is Blaze Parry. So you just stand there and wait until the boss hits you, doing literally nothing.
Yeah.
So, like, I love overcharge as a pre-fire. Like, I love that we finally have like a powerful pre-fire.
I mean,
like,
you had overend, but that was weird.
But like my issue with overend is that it's only the last hit that's powerful, and even then, it's still worse than countering with Blaze Parry. So like, that was our only pre-fire, and it was like okay at best.
Yeah, it was definitely.
It looks cool, but
I was like, it was the look mostly for me, to be fair. So we got some sword information in what we would want to see, and again, I agree. I think that would be really cool, done correctly though. What else are we talking? What about Partisan? What about Wired Lance? What do you got here?
So Partisan, like, this could be fixed. Partisan could actually be fixed with crafts, and very easily. The PAs needs to do more damage by default already. Like, it should be more powerful than Sword when they're overcharge spamming and perfect charging. The Partisan PAs takes more time, is more committal, and it's harder to pull off because no auto Avenger. It's like more risk should be more reward.
Agreed. That's fair. Pretty straightforward.
And for specific changes, I want that the cleaving side PA, like I said, it got a crap that made it slightly front loaded, but it nerfed the total damage. I want the PA to inherently have a higher, like, to be more front loaded. Right now, the PA without any adjustment, it's 60-40. That is minuscule. Like, that means that if you cancel the second half on the base PA, you're losing DPS. DPS is a really bad way to look at Hunter. So I rarely mention it, but in this case, when you lose DPS, you lose total damage too. So it's a loss. And with the crap, it becomes a 69, like 70, 30, and that's still barely anything. But you lose you lose like 100 total damage for the entire PA if you do the entire hit. So in any situation that you might just have to finish with PA because there's nothing else you can do. Because if you cancel it early, you lose total damage. And if you don't cancel it, you do less total damage than the crap that just boosts the Avenger damage. So I want Partisan to have a PA that's just short and quick. So, like, an option. It doesn't even have to be a separate PA. It should be a shorter and quicker option than the main charge Avenger PA, which is tornado. What is it? It's something tornado. I can't remember my own PA's name. I have like 3 different weapons worth of PAs.
Dude, I don't remember my own PA's names, and I use one weapon, so I don't blame you. Half the time I'm like, it's specific. I remember like the part of it, like it's Stork, it's whatever. I don't remember the entire name, so I don't blame you. I think that's a fair ask. I mean, that makes sense because like if you're using a PA, you're punished for attempting to put in or for attempting to at least predict or having to put in that risk, and all that risk and then not getting enough of a reward kind of sucks. So I feel you. What about Wired Lance? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I still a bit more for Partisan. Like I said, the weapon action does like 3 different things. one of those things can be moved, which is quick assault. So quick assault happens when it's a flash. It's like phantom quick cut. That's the best way I can reference it. It's a phantom quick cut. So after you've finished certain attacks like a PB or an assault charge or step attack or step counter, you get a flash on your character, and if you weapon action, you get the quick assault, which is it was a really bad. It was not worth it at all before we got EX kill because we just don't have the PP to use it. There's just not enough PP to like spend on quick assault, even though it's like a damage gain.
It costs PP.
Yeah, it costs PP. It's not free. Oh,
that's
assault charge costs PP, and that costs PP. So it's 20. So to put into perspective how the PP situation on Partisan works, when you counter with a PA, you get 10 PP. Plus 10 PP. PA on Partisan is always 20 PP or higher. It's usually in the 20 PP range. So you're losing 10 PP for countering. You're losing another 10 PP for doing a soul charge, which you're gonna do a decent amount of. You lose another 10 PP if you want a quick assault. So that's down 30 PP.
That's awful. Okay, I have my thoughts on that one too. But go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the PP situation, that's besides the point. But the issue with quick assault is that it's also in a weapon action. And because of that, there are certain cases where you want to parry after you do an assault charge. And if you have that skill activated and you can't, it's pretty niche that it happens, but it's just why? Like, why?
It still happens.
Why should we have it? Yeah, it still happens. So you want to parry, but you quick assault instead, and you lose a bunch of damage because the parry, it backloads a lot of damage.
Gotcha.
Like the easiest change for that would just move the quick assault to this normal attack. And like that's one less thing to deal with. And the normal attack is you only use it for PP. It's not only you use it a lot for PP regeneration, like Partisan or just overall Hunter Avenger should either get more PP refunded when you parry with Avenger, or for Partisan, Volk Raptor should do more and maybe do something with PP. Like there's not a lot that I want to change in Partisan gameplay because Partisan feels really nice when you play it well. Like when it just clicks, it clicks. It feels really good. So there's not a lot I want to change up that would force you to play differently. But like just stuff that you already do should do more. Like quick assault, it should cost no PP at this point too. It should cost no PP. And
Volk Raptor, by the way.
Yeah, and Volk Raptor, like maybe give it a bit more damage. Like allow it to have a bit higher cap. The down factor is really great. It's just even if they don't because like an issue I can see if you increase the cap for Volk Raptor is that you might be really tunnel vision. You might be coming back to being really tunnel vision on Volk Raptor like base.
But I think that's why the cap exists.
Yeah, the low cap, like I see some value because it's still the highest down factor attack in the game. So I would love for it to at least regen PP. Some PP. Like if you hit it at cap, you should get refunded your entire PP bar or something. So like playing well in Partisan should keep you at positive PP, not losing your entire PP bar. But right now it loses your entire PP bar for playing well.
I agree. I think that's definitely the case. So what do we see
for Partisan? So Wildlands, just bigger numbers for each of for all the attacks to like keep them, like assuming that Partisan and Sword get the changes that they need. Wildlands just need damage to catch up to those two options because same with Partisan for me. Wildlands plays really well. Like Partisan, they have two ways to play. Like you can either do more fillers and go for like a more traditional melee play style and just do fillers and into a counter, or you can charge a sword PA to do a Wildlands PA. You got options on Wildlands, and those options just needs to be buffed to match the rest. Like all three weapons should work in harmony. Like each one should, the damage gap between each one should only one option should only be better if that option fits the situation better.
Agreed.
And not because they're just unconditionally better. Like that makes Hunter really boring. Like I said with overcharge. So yeah, Wildlands, like PAs just needs to all be buffed to match the rest. The weapon actions should, the front and the back and the neutral one should be buffed. The side one, it's fine. It's already more powerful than jet intensity with the Avenger buff. It doesn't need anymore. A cool thing that I would like, but like it's really low on the priority list for what I want on Hunter is the back a bit before, I don't remember. I think it was a bit before crafting. The cutting layer PA had a cancel for the final hit where you could get that final hit and a weapon action hit at the same time. It created a really cool cancel loop that wasn't PP positive, but it was like nearly PP neutral. It was really fun to pull off, and I want that back as like a skill or something that isn't unintended. Like Wildlands, like that's the only thing I really want. It's like something to add more to its unconditional down option, because if you're focusing on using Wildlands, you're not, unless you're predicting every single down, you're not always gonna have the Avenger when you're going into a down. So like I want an option as a backup. You know?
I see. Okay, I mean, I feel like those are all pretty level-headed. Now, I'm gonna bounce off you my thoughts. And mine might be crazier than yours, to be honest, because there's some things that I'm like, this just makes sense to me. I don't know why it's not the case. So my first one is going to address damage. Why is Avenger not your strongest option in everything? It attaches to all of your PAs. It is the highest risk, so it should be rewarded. And though I think I can foresee some issues with Partisan, with its one, I can't remember what the name of the PA is that you just kind of hold infinitely. There would have to be some sort of, there has to be some sort of detriment there, but I don't feel like there should ever be a situation where Avenger's not your better choice overall.
Okay. So I might have explained this a bit badly. When I say overcharge is the predominant option, I mean overcharge with the Avenger. The Avenger is always,
right. Well, I mean, it's like properly letting Avenger go, like without consuming, like without considering an overcharge situation, right? So like, I feel like there should be a sweet spot where Avenger is procced, and then there should be a spot afterwards where overcharge is what takes over. The two of them together, I feel like, is what makes swords so insanely more powerful than everything else.
Yeah, like
I feel like the overcharge should be like your safety net if you're not getting the Avenger. That's how that should work itself, instead of having both of them together. And then that would affect overall Partisan and Wirelance's damage, because you could then buff just specifically Avenger procs, not the entire kit breaking it. Also, I don't know why this isn't a thing. Avenger and Overcharge should be main class skills. Why are they not? Like, I don't understand, because it makes a situation where you accidentally break other classes by buffing the main mechanic of the class. And I believe personally that Avenger is like Hunter's like premier mechanic that it should be kind of focused on. So I don't know how you feel about that. Maybe that's too much. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
You're saying the same thing as me on the overcharge thing. It's just because Avenger and overcharge, like the way that the Hunter class term stuff, it's so bad because Avenger is always gonna happen. That's your counter. Like that should, you by default you should assume that it's always gonna be your main option. Is that overcharge on top of Avenger is what causes that issue for me. Like, we were saying the same thing. It's just I couldn't. I didn't preface it in that situation itself, and that's on me. But it should be that Avenger is your goal under all circumstances, and overcharge should be your safety net in situations where either like a boss is downed randomly in the middle of a situation where you would have let go of the ability, or you make a mistake and it's kind of like your backup option. Like that should be the way it works out. Like it should pre-fire backup, like consistent damage, but not the best damage. And that should go for the entire class. Higher risk should be rewarded more. Like javelin, holding javelin should not be as powerful as it is. But the reason that javelin is that powerful as it is because of crafting. Like crafting is so, any change with any craft that appears for Hunter, it's like
Mhm.
it could do a lot. And since the cleaving scythe craft,
Mhm.
it's a slight gain, but like you still lose a bit. Like the net gain is not as strong as just unconditional gain for the partisan, for the javelin one.
Mhm.
So that unconditional gain triumphs every other, like the other craft the partisan has option to. I just hope that the crafts come out like faster, because hunter
Mhm.
hunter balancing is super dependent on crafts, and if crafts are, I when craft first came out, I was really frustrated. It's 1p at a time. I knew that 1p was gonna, like I knew that it was gonna cost 1 PA to have a much higher value than the rest. So that PA will be the focus for a bit. I didn't expect
Yeah.
to be rising like Spiral Edge level of that, but like I
Well,
expected like an unbalance in which PA is powerful. But
listen, someone wanted Spiral Edge to be good, and the monkey's paw curled.
yeah, it was,
But so and this one is more for my partisan mains, and I don't. I have to say I don't know how you would fix that problem. So javelin would need something to like have a detriment of just holding it. Maybe javelin you can't hold
I
anymore forever. Maybe it just has a timer on it or something like that. I don't know. But I don't know why this doesn't exist. But your Volgraptor skill should probably give you PP back. I don't know
yeah
if it that should give PP back. And at the very least, your skills that use your weapon action, if they don't generate PP, they should just activate natural PP recovery and not cost PP. Like that way you would be incentivized to use them. That way you'd have a situation where you are not you're not costing yourself PP. You give yourself a window for natural PP recovery to kick on and activate, right? And
yeah
then you have incentive to make sure you're using your Volcraptors to help supplement your PP to generate PP for you. But then
uh-huh.
you're still incentivized to use your main PAs along with the thing I mentioned earlier with the whole Avenger situation. So I feel like that makes sense. And then I feel like Wire Lance just or benefits from the Avenger situation being better.
Yeah.
Maybe like an ability to stock up a an Avenger counter for Wire Lance specific as like a skill somewhere. I don't really know how you would figure that process out. That way they would always have the ability to have like one they can use from their weapon action. And then like if they were to get another one, there's like a skill that stocks up a second one or something like that. That way you can always
Yeah.
burn one if you need to, but then you could have both if you really wanted to use them. Something like that would be
Yeah.
cool,
That would be cool. Yeah.
like a stack situation. And it's very easy to
Yeah.
show on our, like we have, you know, like little things that they show on the screen for like that sort of situation. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's doable, but that's really kind of it when I think about Hunter. I feel like I've
For
gotten a better understanding for the weapon itself, but I mean, go ahead.
for the javelin one, I don't think it needs to be nerfed. I think the rest of the partisan needs to be buffed, because, like I said, the issue was that the craft gave javelin a gain, no loss. There was no loss at all. When the cleaving scythe one, you either lost the option to front load it to get more total damage, or you get more front loading for cost of total damage. So there's a gain and
Mm-hmm.
a loss for that one, whereas the other one just
Well,
unconditional. So
the
yeah.
only reason I said you'd have to look at Javelin is because the Avenger change I'm proposing would apply
Mhm.
across the board, right? So
Yeah.
everything wouldn't get buffed, and basically the way you would manage in my opinion, the way that you should manage Hunter's overall damage itself, right, is by
Hmm.
tweaking Avenger's damage. It gives incentive to use Avenger consistently as being your main damage option itself, but still having other
Yeah.
options for downs and things of that sort. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I thought about it. Was like if you tweak Avenger up, you're technically also tweaking Javelin up along with
Yeah.
everything else. And if
Yeah.
Javelin's already better, then it's going to continue to be the better choice in that situation.
Yeah.
So
I get where you're coming from. It's just I think how Javelin plays, like
mhm,
how just the gameplay, I think it's like the best that specific niche could have had. I
okay,
don't want to add like an arbitrary, like not arbitrary, but like a gameplay change that would make it be a pain to pull off. Because like I hate that it's the meta for Arcs Record, but I don't want it to not exist either, because
I
having a
see.
consistent dumb funny option like Options exist.
It is
like
dumb. Stabbing into death is hilarious to me. By the way,
yeah.
that's what I pictured in my head, was just stabbing until red HP bar.
It was
So
funny to me until all the stuff that I did was meaningless compared to just holding one button, just
I
like
see. I see.
overcharge. If I had a nickel for every time that happened, I would be
Yeah,
rich.
I
If I had a
see.
nickel for every time something that I tried to do more than just one thing, and
Mhm.
it was worse, I would be a millionaire on Hunter right now. Like it was,
That's
oh man,
that's pretty wild. Well, I mean, I feel
yeah.
like we've gotten a pretty good wrap up of everything here. It's a pretty decent time. We're not too far on the recording itself, so we're at a good spot, I think, overall. To
Mhm.
kind of help wrap things up, were there any specific shout outs you wanted to give? Any individual people, any sort of resources, any sort of like locations, anything like that? Even feel free to shout yourself out. If you don't, I'm going to anyway. So by all means.
Well, I like to thank all the people that just logs information for NGS. All that stuff is so influential in me mapping out my rotation and just general knowledge for the game and my knowledge for the game. It's them compiling those like people like Uber, Mill, people in PSO2 Central.
Mhm.
I don't talk in anywhere at all, but I'm always reading those places. And those places give me a lot of information that I otherwise wouldn't have come across. So, I want to shout them out.
Mhm.
The PSO2 Central Discord I'm talking about is the Discord that goes with the unofficial leaderboard for NGS.
Mhm.
They do stuff like they have a leaderboard for basically every solo challenge content and group content that is currently out.
Mhm.
And yeah, those resources are amazing for me figuring out my class and just general knowledge for the game.
That's pretty cool. I'll have to look into that. I actually did not know that. I mean, maybe I know that Discord exists and don't realize it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. So that's pretty dope. Any other
Uh,
resources or anything like that you wanted to go ahead and shout out?
um, that's about it.
Okay,
That's
cool.
that's a lot of people I covered in one. So there was no specific names, but if you're
Okay.
in those Discord and you contribute to those resources, yeah,
Gotcha.
you're a hero.
Gotcha. Of course, of course. And I'm gonna go ahead and shout out Machi for taking the time, because this interview has been a long time waiting. I had to go through quite a few of these, and then we both had our own stints of being busy. Between, I think, what yours was a D2 for a little while and some other stuff going
Yeah,
on, and then
me
I
too.
had some Final Fantasy stuff pop up and PSO2 and all kinds of other things, and then forgetting certain things had to come up in headlines. It's been a lot of conversation back and forth in Discord. So
Uh-huh.
I'm appreciative of your time and providing it to me and the channel. That way people can get a little bit more information about Hunter, because I learned a lot that like a ton that I was totally unaware of, and I feel it's really awesome to be able to start to provide that information to those out there, because I know there are Hunter mains around. I know you guys like to
Yeah.
meme around that I'm the Hunter main, but I'm not. I'm not the Hunter main in slightest. Machi's the Hunter main. Talk to them about it. Mention them when you think about Hunter main, not me, someone else. I don't know, or I will be gathering all applicable links and socials for the video description. So if you guys want to check them out individually, we are actually on ship one. I didn't mention that, but we are over on ship one. So Machi's main character is on ship one. In case you do see them,
Yep.
say hi, wave, be cool. It's super cool of you guys. Don't be cringe. Who am I kidding? We play PSO2. We're all kind of cringe. Let's be for real. But yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thanks for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I think that's all we've got. Thanks for watching all the end, guys. Thanks to those who toss on any comments. I'm sure Machi will be reading through them. I always read through them as well. I mean, I always
Yep.
answer them because some of you guys write paragraphs. Maybe Machi will, but I definitely won't. I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate them all the same. Thanks to my wonderful channel members. You guys are fantastic individuals. Like I mentioned in the previous video, we are going to be adding in our totally spaced because I'm really good at outros. We will be adding in all of our emotes over from Twitch over on YouTube, and we'll be looking at doing some YouTube streams in the future. So I want to go ahead and mention that to you guys overall. But yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for being here, guys, and take care, my friends. Peace out.